Hello and welcome to today's episode of Portfolio Business, brought to you by Roche Hungary. I'm Levente Hörnpölitót. As we all know, we live in turbulent times. The pandemic, geopolitical tension, the energy crisis, soaring inflation, and now tariff wars have created a world of uncertainty in which governments struggle to balance budgets and generate growth. So, under such harsh circumstances, why should governments view healthcare spending not as a burden, but as an ultimate growth driver? I'm joined by Peter Ahnesorg, General Manager of Roche Hungary, to find answers to that question and explore the topic. Thank you so much for coming, Peter.
Thanks for having me, Levente. It's great to be here.
Yeah, we have a very, very exciting agenda, right? So let's just jump right in. As has been mentioned, the economy out there is very, very gloomy. There's so much uncertainty and government struggle. And Hungary is no exception. Pundits often call this whole situation as a growth crisis. And in such a situation, the natural response from a government would be to cut public spending. That often concerns healthcare. Now, you're arguing that this logic is wrong, so you want to tell us why that is?
Sure. Well, let's first look at the current situation. As you say, we live in turbulent times, and I think since the beginning of the year, the world has become even more turbulent than we ever imagined. I think many of us have been grown up in times where global trade was a certain driver of prosperity and growth. And now we're seeing more and more barriers, more and more austerity measures all over the world that make it hard for individual economies like Hungary, and also hard, frankly, for the entire European Union. And we've observed many debates on what to do. At the same time, we're also acutely confronted with the reality that we need to defend ourselves, and sort of the certainty of allies like the United States that we've had in the past doesn't exist anymore. So governments, on top of having a growth problem, also need to put money into defense and other important sectors. And in all of this, I think it's very tempting for governments, administrations to basically slash spending and try to put austerity measures in place. What we've learned from history is that this is not a recipe for future growth. This becomes a trap where you're putting yourself and the country on a downward spiral. I think what I'm trying to argue is that instead of putting austerity measures in place in a situation like this, we really need to think about our strength and then invest accordingly. And one of the ways that I think Europe and Hungary in the center of Europe can address that is by really thinking about life sciences as a unique opportunity for us to boost our competitiveness and to get back into a growth, a growth period for our economy. I always like analogs. And one great analog for the situation we're in and what I'm trying to describe happened in the end of the 1990s when sort of digital came up and the analog film business was confronted with an acute crisis that there was no demand anymore for classical film. And so two companies in this space, Kodak and Fujifilm, chose really opposing ways to address this crisis. Kodak, on the one front, really decided to view this as a cost problem, trying to conserve resources, focus on the core business, and eventually, as many of us I think know, it led to bankruptcy. On the other hand, Fujifilm took this as an opportunity to really diversify their portfolio. Instead of saying, well, we were not making money anymore with our core business, and so we don't have money to invest in R&D, they actually doubled down on investing in R&D, thinking about what does their strength, which was expertise in chemistry and expertise in film, where can that lead them to? And that took them down the path of life sciences, and now they're a multi-billion dollar venture that has been extremely successful and prosperous. And I'm arguing the same is true for Europe and countries like Hungary at the moment, where we really need to think about our strength and invest accordingly.
That's a cautionary tale indeed, but let's take a look at another great example, that of South Korea, because they also heavily invested in ICT in the middle of a financial crisis. And fast forward a few decades, and now basically they are a global powerhouse. So what do you think Hungary could adopt from that playbook?
Yeah, look, when I tell the tale of Kodak and Fujifilm, right? Many people say, well, look, you're talking about companies, right? This is not true for countries. And I'm saying it's quite to the contrary, right? Like in the end, countries like Hungary operate similar to other businesses, right? They're subject to the same mechanics. And as you nicely say, South Korea in the end of the 90s, 1997, was confronted with the Asian financial crisis, and they figured that they could no longer compete in sort of the low-wage, cheap work sector. And again, instead of putting in place austerity measures, keeping the budget tight, not investing, they actually decisively chose back then to invest in internet infrastructure. Now, fast forward to 2025, right? Internet infrastructure is a done deal, right? That's not the place to invest anymore. So what we're arguing is the new sector to invest in is life sciences. And why is that the case? Internet infrastructure in the end of the 90s built the foundation of building a high-tech industry, right? And so look at the success of South Korea today, Samsung, LG, right? All these companies and their global success was built on the infrastructure, right? The foundation that was built. Life sciences is the foundation of the future for two main reasons. One, it's an absolute growth industry. We're living at an age where technology and AI leads us to an understanding of biology and disease that is unprecedented, and there is so much opportunity to translate that into better medicines and better healthcare for patients. And this is very relevant for Hungary because if there's one asset that this country really has, and it's been amazing for me to see that ever since I moved to Hungary earlier this year, it's the talented people, right? You have highly educated scientists, doctors, pharmacists that build the backbone of future potential in life sciences. And that obviously has a long history, right? If we look at all the Nobel laureates that originate from Hungary. And then secondly, right, there is another problem that our societies all over the world are confronted with. And this is, we live in an age where the population is aging and we have an avalanche of what's called non-communicable diseases. So diseases that are not given from one human being to the other, but that sort of emerge in our bodies. Diseases like cancer, diseases like multiple sclerosis, diseases like diabetes, right, heart disease. And these health problems, right, become to a real economic problem in our society because they take healthy people out of our productive working sort of population. And in addition, right, we grow older and older, so it becomes even more important to keep people healthy so that they can be productive in the economy. And so by investing in life sciences, you sort of do two things at the same time. You're investing in a growth sector and you're investing in actually keeping your population healthy and productive. And that's why I think what was the internet and internet infrastructure for South Korea in 1997 is life sciences for Europe and specifically Hungary today.
So as you just mentioned, Hungary is very, 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 very much proud of herself, of having a strong scientific basis on which the country should be able to rely. But when you look at Hungary as a clinical research hub, where do you think we shine and where do we fall short?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Levente. Hungary for us is a really important clinical research hub. We actually have a specialized clinical trials unit based here in Budapest that is running clinical trials, not only in Hungary, but also in some of the neighboring countries. We currently have 50 clinical trials with innovative medicines running in the country, working with roughly 100 sites. So not only with the big centers like Debrecen or Semmelweis University, but really with a broad number of centers all over the country. And we find really, really talented physicians and collaborators to help us with research. So I think that's the strength, right? The biggest challenge I think is that medicine is rapidly progressing, and in some areas Hungary is unfortunately still lagging behind, and this is frankly due to a lack of investment in healthcare and novel medicines, and this needs to be addressed to continue to be attractive for clinical research in the future. Because, you know, if you can think about it with the iPhone, right? If everybody's using iPhone 16, but you're still on iPhone 11, and Apple wants to introduce iPhone 17, right? They're going to go to the people that are using the latest version, and not the ones that are lagging, you know, several versions behind. And so I think this is the watch out, right? And this is why I think it's so important for us to think how we can collectively, both the government as well as industry, invest in life sciences here, because I think if we do that, and if we do that sustainably, we can create an ecosystem that will really not only benefit Hungarian patients, but also accelerate R&D in the country.
We've been talking about the potential Hungary has, but why don't we take a look at what Roche is up to? Like, what innovation solutions are you working on? What's in the pipeline?
Yeah. So, I mean, we are one of the biggest investors in R&D in the world, and so we are very proud of the research that is happening in our laboratories. I think there's two maybe novel approaches that I'd love to share with you. One is a problem that we're all confronted with, and that's dementia. So more and more people, the estimation is actually 55 million people currently in the world are suffering from dementia, 70% of which is Alzheimer's disease. And currently there are no good therapies for Alzheimer's disease, despite the fact that we actually understand the biology of the disease quite well. One of the fundamental problems is that our body does a really nice job protecting the brain. So medicines don't really get into the brain very well. There's a barrier that our body puts in between. And so our researchers were able to develop a technology that's called brain shuttle that actually actively transports a medicine from the bloodstream into the brain using a transporter mechanism. And this now allows us to use the biology we already understand and this transporter mechanism to bring more effective drugs into the brain to hopefully address Alzheimer's disease. This is still under active research, so we're waiting to hopefully see the results of this, but we're very, very excited that this could make a huge difference for patients suffering from this disease.
We need to talk about artificial intelligence because, you know, it always comes up. You know, that's what basically fuels the global economy and drives it forward, and we all know that the global AI race is on. Now, Europe is lagging a little bit behind compared to the US and China, but there's still huge opportunities, in particular when it comes to the data economy, right? And Hungary should have also a great potential in this department. But what does it take to turn this into a competitive advantage? We all know that Hungary has lots of invaluable healthcare data, and the European regulation is underway, and there's like a very, very short window in which Hungary could actually become the forerunner in this area.
Levente, I think you're raising a really good point, which is in this current situation, right? We're in competition. Many countries, right, are looking for solutions, and we really need to be decisive and fast. And I think Hungary has a very unique opportunity, particularly in the digital healthcare space, because it already has built the infrastructure, and it's up and running and it's working, which is fantastic and is different to many other European countries. To me, there's two key things that we need to be very decisive on. One is, I really think we need to play within the European context. To me, there is no other alternative than a European health data space. And I think Hungary has the potential to be a forerunner in this and actually define some of the fundamental frameworks that will govern sort of this movement. And if we do this well, right, over the next few years, this is going to make Hungary extremely attractive for companies to invest here and to use this sort of as a trial space to get ready for what's to come all over Europe. The second element is there is incredible potential not only in the data infrastructure, but as you mentioned, also in the application of AI. For example, in the regulatory space, right? So when we go through this process of having a novel drug and then ensuring that through regulation, we bring it safely to patients all over Europe. And there is the concept of creating sort of regulatory AI sandboxes to actually test drive how AI can really create value in this space. And I would really encourage us here in Hungary to jump on that train and offer Hungary as a potential sandbox to test some of these concepts, because again, I think this is going to make Hungary extremely attractive for research if companies know that this is the place where you can test some of these concepts. So those are, I think, the two ways that we need to look at for the future. If we look at the present, I think we can already be very proud. Just a couple weeks ago, I attended a Central European Lung Cancer Conference here in Budapest, and Hungarian researchers actually presented data created out of the Hungarian data ecosystem on the treatment of lung cancer patients. And one of the big challenges that we're facing in research is, you do an initial experiment, which is always, by definition an experiment and is a small group of patients. And you never quite know, right, if this is actually then true for all the Hungarian patients, for example, or for all the patients in Central Europe. What was really reassuring to see is in this Hungarian data set, looking at thousands of patients in Hungary that were treated over the past years, we were able to see that novel medications to treat lung cancer are really doing what we think they should do. And are providing great benefits to patients. And this, I think, this is the great opportunity when you have a data space like we have here in Hungary, that you can really validate sort of the promise of research is actually panning out for Hungarian patients. And that has value, obviously, for Hungarian patients. It has value for society because we know we invest in something that creates value. And it has lots of value for companies like Roche because we can demonstrate that, hey, look, the medicines we bring, we're not only talking that they're innovation, but we actually can show that they make a difference for patients.
Now that you mentioned Roche, maybe you want to share some information about what AI-related efforts that your company is involved in.
Yeah, so I mean, as I think in all the different businesses, AI is everywhere at the moment. I think everybody's trying to figure out where it can create value. And I think there is a big question mark also sometimes, right? Can it really create value? I'd love to share 3 examples that are maybe not the ones that one would typically think about that nicely illustrate how much value it's already creating for us. So one is when we manufacture a drug, you can't just open a new drug manufacturing site somewhere in a different place and start producing your drug, right? It's actually a process that is called tech transfer. You need to take the process that happens in one factory that is validated and sort of approved by the authorities, and then you transfer it very carefully to another site to ensure that it's in the end the same medicine, right? And that process typically took us more than 1.5 years. Now, using AI tools in the process, we've been able to reduce that time to start up a new manufacturing site to less than 6 months. And this is really because AI can handle data at scale so much more efficiently than human beings or other digital tools were able to do in the past. Another great example that I really like more from sort of our research is, when you invent a drug, obviously, one problem you need to solve is how do you get it into the patient, right? And maybe you want to put it into a syringe so that you can inject it into a patient. But if you want to put it into a syringe, right, it needs to be liquid enough so that you can easily push, right? If it's too viscous, too sticky, then you can't push the syringe effectively. In the past, this has required lots of trial and error. Now, based on the data that we've been able to generate for hundreds of the medicines we already developed, we have AI tools that help you to predict the viscosity, so the stickiness of a new formulation, really simplifying the process of understanding how do you need to formulate a drug so that it can be much more easily administered to patients. And there's many more use cases I could tell you about, but we're seeing this really along the entire spectrum from, the initial discovery and the research we do all the way to then, how actually even our employees here in Hungary are working every day using AI tools to understand, what is it that Hungarian physicians really want to hear from us in terms of scientific news and updates and really important information on our drugs, making them accessible to patients here.
Yeah, it's just saying AI is incredible because it speeds up processes, it streamlines processes, it creates so much value by making things more efficient than they were. And obviously, the number of use cases seems to be endless. And it seems that Roche is making the most out of these opportunities. Now, I really want to talk about this concept that you call the economic hedge, the economic hedge role of healthcare, because you regard health as this hedge that protects a country or the country's economy against long-term risk. So basically, it could function like a rocket, so to say, that could basically help the economy reach new heights, and not only reach it, but also stay up there in the long run. So I'm really curious about how this whole concept works.
Yeah, thanks. So look, as we spoke about, governments at the moment are facing a real challenge. Our economy is not growing very strongly. We see that our population is getting older and older. So we have more people who are pensioners and fewer people who are actually working. And we see that the people who are working are actually getting sick, right? And can't be as productive. So why is investing into healthcare relevant in this situation? It's because when you provide innovative medicine, you're actually contributing to a more healthy workforce. That means people are more productive. And that means that for every 1 forint that you put into ensuring that your people are more healthy, you're generating actually 3 forints in return to the GDP. Let me give you a concrete example. Multiple sclerosis. Multiple sclerosis is a disease that affects people typically in their 30s and 40s. So this is the prime age, right, where people are contributing to productivity in the society. Or it's actually the age where you're raising a family, right, you're caring for your kids, you're enabling the next generation. If we go back 20 years, 15 years, multiple sclerosis was a really grave disease because it meant when you got diagnosed, you were on a journey to getting more and more disabled with every relapse of the disease. Meaning that, if you were diagnosed in your early 30s, by your mid 40s, you were maybe in a wheelchair, maybe not able to work anymore, the job that you were trained to do, not able to care for your family. And by the way, multiple sclerosis is also a disease that predominantly affects women. Now, we actually have amazing medicines that completely change the course of this disease. If you're diagnosed with multiple sclerosis today here in Hungary, you have access to novel medicines that actually prevent you from going down this route of disability and can keep you stable for many, many years. And that then in turn means instead of going down, having plenty of visits to the hospital, potentially ending up in a wheelchair, you can carry on with your normal life. Some of the medicines that we now have only need to be administered twice a year. So what used to be a really challenging healthcare problem is now a chronic situation where you have to worry about getting your treatment twice a year and can maintain a fairly normal life. And this productivity gain, right, we're seeing with many innovations across many disease areas. This was just one example. And this is why investing in healthcare is a hedge, because it's not only sort of fueling the life science industry, right, and encouraging companies like Roche to invest money in a country like Hungary. By the way, our contribution to the Hungarian GDP is about 130 billion forints every year that we're putting into the country in terms of the jobs we generate, the research we do here. So we're a significant contributor already to the Hungarian economy. And then our medicines, right, are creating benefits for patients that in turn increase productivity.
Another very, very important matter is what role governments should assume, because it seems to me that a whole new mindset would be needed, and it would be great to see like how you actually imagine an ideal partnership between the government and companies like Roche. What concrete steps should be taken by the administration in order to get the most out of healthcare?
Thanks. I mean, you shared with me earlier, Levente, that you worked at HIPAA, right, the Hungarian Investment Promotion Agency. And so
Indeed.
I think the government is already doing some really important things, which is, focused to help companies like Roche to invest in the country and see the promise and the collaboration that Hungary can bring. And I think HIPAA is a great example for that, and we're certainly really happy with the partnership that we've already had with the Hungarian government. Looking into the future, there are some basic principles that matter, in fact, for every industry and every economy, so that we can see growth. The first one is predictability. Companies like Roche can invest in various different countries. We obviously like to invest when we know what's going to happen, when we know the conditions, right, in which we will operate. So creating a predictable healthcare environment where we can count on, a sort of approval of our drugs in a predictable time frame is really important, and that is something that I think we would like to see from the government. Secondly, transparency. What's also really important is that we can have an open dialogue with the government. And this is not only Roche, right? This is the entire industry and other players in healthcare. And we understand, what is the government's strategy? And this brings me to the last and maybe most important point. I think Hungary has a really unique opportunity next year with the election to create a Ministry of Health. Regardless of who wins the election and what the new administration is looking like, I think a country like Hungary deserves to have a clearly articulated strategy for what we want to do here in the country with healthcare and how we want to serve the patients. And the way to do this, and this has been established in many countries, is to have a dedicated ministry, because that's the way how you can define a national healthcare plan, and that will give us the transparency, the partnership, and the predictability that is needed so that companies like Roche can come to the country and invest.
Yeah, the establishment of a Minister of Health sounds like a great step one to me. Now, today we talk about all kinds of bets. We've got the Trump bet, the AI bet, all kinds of bets. But the term bet implies some sort of risk-taking, sometimes even a little bit irrational. So from what you've been explaining to me, it seems that it's not betting on healthcare, what we're talking about. It should be more like a no-brainer to invest heavily into life sciences, because as we've been discussing, it can function as a hedge, and it can offer basically endless opportunities and as a major growth engine for the economy. So why do you think it's not a non-brainer yet, and what does it take to turn this whole concept and this whole approach into a thing that should be just adopted right away without thinking about it, without having any second thoughts?
Levente, look, I don't think it's a bet, and it's not even a no-brainer. I think it's an existential question. If we look at the situation today, people here in Hungary between the age of 30 and 70, so these are the people, right, who are actively contributing to the economic prosperity of the country, are 30% more likely to die of non-communicable diseases than the average in Europe. So this means, you're not only getting older, but out of the people who are supposed to do the work in the country, people are dying from diseases that are preventable, And so it's not only a no-brainer, it's existential. And if we don't manage to address it, I don't see any way how we can have economic prosperity in the future. And so, to me, it really goes back to thinking about your strength, right? I really feel that in Hungary and in Europe, we are at a time where we have a bit of an identity crisis, and we need to reconsider what is the fundamental strength that we bring. And what I'm seeing here in Hungary is the fundamental strength that we have is the intelligent, highly educated people that build the workforce. And so how can we put that capital to work? And my proposition is investing in life sciences is the surest bet to really realize that. And it's not, as you say, a bet, but in the end, if you look at it very closely, it's an existential move that anyways we will have to make if we want to see growth in the future.
Well, you've convinced me, for starters, and I don't know whether it matters or not, but thank you so much for the great food for thought and sharing all these great insights with us today.
Levente, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
And thank you all for watching and listening. See you next time.